Okay, it's Roger, the voice of Mud Fossil University, with a little discussion today about Tesla and about the ether that is the universe. And the ether is not just air and so forth. The ether is literally an electronic soup. We are in an electronic soup. And I intend to show you and present evidence to support that. And exactly what Tesla said, exactly identical, every single syllable that man ever said from his lips, as far as I'm concerned, was correct. And I can see all the evidence. And his evidence just it pours out of everything. You see this right here? That's an explosion inside of this tube that had nothing in there but air and was crushed. Now let me back this up a little bit so you can see how this originated. Alright, so here's this fella. Alright, now watch. You see that? What he's doing, I'm going to stop it. He's got a plunger and it's sealed very well and there's just nothing but air in there. Now when he drives that down, he's creating a huge spark. And these start fires. I have one and it works well, except mine, you can't see through it. So when he comes down, it crushes the air. And that causes a fire to start. Now, there's more to think about these. Oh, it just crushes the air and that's why the fire started. Well, let's go a little deeper. Why big deal? I can crush air in my hands. I can crush air in a bottle or a paper bag. It doesn't start on fire. Why is this? Now, I'm going to show you exactly why this happens. And it is literally the identical same process as an atomic bomb. The only difference is that there is not enough compression to disassociate the nuclear bits, the central nucleus parts. What we have done when this crushes and all of this material, which is air at this point, becomes so confined as that the electrons are forcing themselves into a condition that they cannot stay. That's quantum. Quantum says you have to stay at a certain place. You cannot come any closer to the nucleus than a certain area. And when this event happens and he crushes everything in here, it's so violent, so instantaneous, that those electrons now have invaded the region of magnetism that they cannot stay. And they are exploded away, and that's what you see is the fire is in there. Now, that's fine, but say, well, how does that happen? Where does the fire come from? There's no energy that was in there. Well, the energy came from his hand, but why did the fire start? Well, the fire started because the electrons, which heat is nothing more than electrons moving, the electrons push like that away from their central cores. All right, so you say, okay, well, that's fine. And that's what started the fire. Well, that's true. However, where did the electrons get replaced from? They have to come from somewhere. That's the ether. Electrons are everywhere. If you need some, you can just pull them out of the ether. That's what Tesla was talking about. If you need some, you can just pull them out of the ether. And that's what this is all about. Alright, this is just to prep you for what you're going to see. What the takeaway from here is that this particle can be attracted to this nucleus and not attached to it. It's attracted and repelled. Watch what happens here. It can be attracted, boom, and repelled. Okay, so it maintains a quantum distance. Extremely important to understand this. Alright, that's the same particle, and now he's got it being pushed away because all he had to do was turn it over. So it's in a different polarity. Now, that's extremely important because we now know that there's a way of anti-gravity and gravity. Okay, so let's go from there so we understand these things. Okay, I told you that you can just pull the electrons out of the ether, and the ether literally is everywhere. So this, I can tell you, is virtual proof of this. This is a firecracker. It's exploding underwater. This is the internal look, and this is what we see as it comes out at us. Now I'm going to stop this as it goes. And what it's going to do now, that firecracker, I'm stopping it now, the firecracker here is internally in here. This is the shock wave that is presented outwardly. And we're seeing the outward effect of the shock wave here and the brilliance of it. All right? Now, what's going to happen? This cavity is expanding in a shock wave ahead of the actual substance of the explosion. So the chemistry of this explosion is now expended, and well, very soon will be, and this light will dim out to almost nothing. All right, what you will see is a bunch of little glittery, little sparkly, little colored, flashy little diamond looking things. And what that is those are the colors that are in the visible spectrum. All right, they're the colors that we can see. So I know that it's something in there, and if you could analyze those specific spectral colors, you would know what it is that is giving those off, because that's the way quantum works. It works in these colors, these frequencies. They determine the distance that the electron is moving. That's the frequency. Now, here's what's going to happen. This chemistry now is here. The shock wave is ahead of it, so what's it going to fill up with? There's a hole here. It's dragging electrons into that hole, and you will see them fill up in here. And then you will see, as it begins to crush back down, they will boil. And I'll sort of, run my mouth as this happens. Here we go. Here it's continuing. Now look, this is the internal shot. You see it? It's getting very dim because it's expended its energy. But this is getting very, very bright. And this here, you'll see all of these flashy things. This is the major spot of cavitation because it's moving upwards, and that's the major force. And you'll see the diamonds start to hear, I call them diamonds. They're diamonds. See it? Look at them. Isn't that cool? Now, what's going on there, you see them? You see the different colors? Those colors are signatures. Those are literal signatures of saying I'm a oxygen, or I'm a hydrogen, or whatever it is. And here they are pulling those electrons from the normal H2O, hydrogen, oxygen. They're two nucleuses with they're nucleuses with a bunch of little floaty electrons on it. So they're just literally pulling them out of that, and they're pulling them into here. And again, I've said this many times, and I can't not yet explain this, but this particular membrane is almost like the membrane in a cell. And a cell in your body has what they call hydrophilic and hydrophobic action. And that allows only water to pass one way. Just put it this way. It's a separation zone that cannot be passed by certain things. And I'm saying it will not let these electrons go back in there. For some reason it won't. They've sucked them in here. And when this collapses, you'd think they'd just walk back in here. It will not let them go back. There's going to be a violent try to keep them in there. And when it does, this will become so compressed that the electrons will be so forced in against those nucleuses that they just cannot maintain that, and then they just violently expel themselves. And just watch it. All right, so here it goes, still going out. Look at all the little diamonds showing up, see them? Those are all the electrons being sucked out of the water. And they're going into that cavitation. You see, it's just totally gone. There's no more explosion here. Now it's coming back and crushing. Now you see, watch out here. Watch for this. You know what boiling water looks like. You're going to see boiling water, but it's boiling electrons. You see it? You see those little pockets of boilingness? You see it? Just like a boiling water. And now it's getting compressed, and it's coming back in, and you're going to see the compression start to grow in here, and the excitation, and all of the electrons are being they're being crushed in such a manner that they have to pop away like a magnet does. Here it goes. I'll just let it continue on. Here they go, boiling, boiling, boiling. Crushing, crushing, crushing. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it. I'm out. Now, before it goes, you can see this does not want to let that back in. I cannot explain that, other than hydrophilic and hydrophobic action. Somebody smarter than me is going to have to figure that out. It does not want that to come back this way. All it's going to do is say, okay, bring those electrons, just crush them in there, and it brings them all back in, and they just, doof, and here it goes. Watch, it'll just pop like a cork. Gone. No more energy in there. Now we're seeing the external. This is that only took a hundredth of a second, that whole process we went through. So this is extreme slow motion, 125,000 frames a second. Very, 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 very fast. And many, 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 many shots per instant in time. I'm seeing what I'm seeing. I don't know what you're seeing, but I saw a violent explosion of electrons. That's what I'm saying. Okay, these are slow-mo guys again, and they're doing sonoluminescence. Well, they don't realize it, but they're doing sonoluminescence. What they're showing is a slow motion of a Chinese water ball. He rubs his hands back and forth. It creates a resonance frequency, and this starts to vibrate, and you'll see it all shake. Now, the metal itself, where it touches the water, will flood electrons. And I'll show you this. Here we go. All right, here we go. Ooh, hear it? All right, now I'm going to turn the speaker off. See, 2,500 frames a second. Now, watch what happens over here. It's going to start to vibrate. You see the vibrations? I'm going to be stopping it here and there. See the thum, 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 thum. You see them? Shake, shake, shake. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to see where the bowl hits the water. You're going to see little lights, 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 and they're going to be ripping electrons out of the bowl. You see? Get ready. Right here it goes. Boom, boom, boom. There. You see them? They'll flash up here. Now, here's the takeaway. This is very important. This is a shadow of his hand. All right? So we're not going to see these lights in the shadow. We're going to see them in the sunlight. Now, these lights are not like reflections. That is a sonoluminescent explosion of each one of those dots where the water is literally ripping itself apart. Interestingly, is that they don't happen under the shadows. My feeling here is that the electron flood from the sun, because they're out in the sunlight, and the sun continuously pours electrons onto the surface of the earth. That electron flood from the sky enhances the pulling of the electrons from the metal and makes them really explode. So let's watch it. It's very interesting. Here it goes. Shake. See him? Shake, shake, shake. Not in the shadow. See it? Boom, boom. And they're starting to light up all over the place here. Now, here's the next takeaway. You see this water? Let's back up here. I've shown this thing. I love these guys. These are the best guys. Fabulous. All right. Here's starting over again. Now, this water is a clear water. You see right through it. It's just normal looking water. But when this starts shaking, they say that sonoluminescence, those little balls of light, will be in the millions of degree temperature. Literally millions of degrees. And I can believe it's correct because I can see it's heating up the water. It's flooding the water with electrons. And that's what heat is. It's flooding water with additional electrons. They go into an area where they're confined, and they're pushing against everybody else in the electrons. And that's why if you put a cap on a water when you're boiling, it'll explode. They have to get out of there. They have to release that energy, and you're pushing that into there. And you're doing it with heat if you're doing it in a pan of water, and you're doing it with sonoluminescence here. So watch the texture. The texture of this water will change, and it will change, and you will see it. It's exactly what you see in boiling water. You see here's a flashing, flashing. See, look at the texture. See the texture? You see that? And it'll just keep moving its way out. And eventually this whole thing will be flooded with this. And that's when they can't maintain themselves. They explode like a fire, only it's water exploding. You see the texture moving its way in? Now it's starting to move in from everywhere. See, there's the same things are everywhere around. And they're coming. That's the nature of this. That is not reflections. Those are actual sonoluminescence explosions. Now it's so flooded with electrons that it has nothing it can do but look at them, they're starting to explode these things up in the air. And I know why that's happening too, because they are now going into a state of positiveness versus the Earth. And that's, I'm pretty sure that's what causes the anti-gravity. And these are not jumping up in the air because they're being like you're jumping in the water and making a big splash. These are jumping up in the air because they've gone into anti-gravity because of the electron transfer. That's what I believe. Alright, the reason I'm saying all these things about weightlessness and anti-gravity is because of this guy, John Hutchison.
Of energy, enough for a small light bulb, Hutchison made a 60-pound cannonball rise off the table. It would also fuse dissimilar materials, heat metal but not burn the wood it sat on, shatter metal as well as change its crystalline structure. This was something to write home about.
Beginning of 1980, I experimenting with all the electromagnetics and electrostatic equipments I had at the time. I started to notice some very, very unusual effects, such as a room being filled up very quickly with multicolored lights.
All right, there's a smoking gun right there. We saw that inside the sonoluminescence. Where the electron, they're electrons. He has disassociated electrons. And that's what we saw inside the firecracker explosion, where it pulled the electrons out of the water. They were disassociated because of the violent expansion of the cavitation of the water and because of the ether effect of electrons. They're everywhere. They will just go where they're needed. And he goes on to say a few more things, but this is, and watch, look
steel
at this.
Bars sitting on wood and not causing any fires, metal turning to jelly, things levitating,
See
and
that?
jumping off to the
A
ceiling or
saw.
simply go
Aluminum
up, hover,
foil.
and then fall
Look
back
at
down.
that. All right, that's the water, whatever was in there. The moisture that was in there has a certain molecular properties, and that means it has a certain quantum characteristic, and those electrons that are in this exact distance, he can shake them, and they call it resonance frequency. It's called standing wave. He can make that push these electrons away, and then the core feeds its negativeness outwards, and the core becomes positive, and that is what causes it reflection from the Earth, anti-gravity. All right, this is the last piece of the light puzzle. You saw all the different claims that I'm making that electrons are being expelled from violently shaking matter. The sun is a violent shaking matter as far as I'm concerned, and it expels light, and light comes to us through space as a particle spinning. Some spin slowly, some spin fast, and when they hit nucleated particles like the space station or Earth or a person or whatever's going on out there, it lights that thing up because it is hitting it, and when it hits the mass of that thing, which we will discuss this, it radiates, it pushes away, it hits another electron in that mass, and just like a screen door, it bounces off of that ball of electrons. Okay, so that's what we see down here as it starts to hit our atmosphere, and then it radiates in all these different colors and so forth. Now from the moon it radiates, but in a very long wavelength, because it's re-radiating the light from the sun. So in the moon radiation, you can only get into the red spectrum pretty much. You don't get the real bright colors of the sunlight. And in blood, I believe blood looks black in moonlight, and it looks red in daylight. But it's all a matter of bouncing off electrons off of complete particles. They hit it just like you hit a screen door. There's like a screen ball around the nucleuses. And when these incoming little bits hit that, and they drive a piece of that away, and that creates light, or they will accept it in, and that is the heat. As it travels through space, it's dark energy and dark matter, because there's nothing for it to collide with. And all of them coming out of here have this negativity, so they don't react to each other until they hit something that has a complete core, which is the nucleus.